Hello, welcome all to this Sattology session. And I have a remarkable personality with me from the US. He's an American Hindu and he has spoken spoken in many places. His videos are extremely popular and he has a deep insight. And this our work at Sattology, since we are connecting with American students, is to bring a very academic and historical accounts. We want to debunk all mythology and bring out the truth. Unfortunately, the history of the world is written by people who have oppressed others. But here is our chance to redeem the pride of the natives who lost their narratives. So here we have our speaker panels, different speakers. You heard four speakers today. Is the fifth one. And this gentleman is known to question everything with a very deep insight. So without delay, would like all of you to welcome Sri Raj Vedam from Texas.
Thank you. Namaste, and very happy to be on your forum.
Namaste. And so you have very pleasing personality. I think whatever you say, people are going to accept it.
I hope so.
So do you have to really work on something, or just by your mere presence you're able to win people's heart?
I don't know. I'm just being who I am. I try not to be anything else but who I am.
No, that's very good. Now, coming back to this, every few years the world breaks apart. There has been not a single year since the dawn of civilization that there was never a war. So, before I start off anything, so for all the peace loving people, this is a little bit rhetorical question that does peace depend on war? And then we move on to our topics that we spoke about.
That is such a lovely insight of binaries that one binary cannot exist by itself because it requires the other for its definition. So semantically, when we talk about peace, that means there exists something called war. And the absence of war is peace, and the absence of peace is war, or whatever. So this kind of a thinking. So I guess semantically, if we restrict ourselves to such a notion of binaries, then we'll be forced to accept that either this is true or that is true, or perhaps a state of being in between where we are both at peace and at war, like the Indo-Pakistan line of control kind of situation where hostilities are not ended, but it continues. So war again can be seen in so many perspectives. War in terms of land, possession, and other wars that we have in terms of battling our own demons and so on. So I think it's a very interesting perspective to consider things happening around us in the perspective of peace and war.
Absolutely. Now, coming back to our main topics now, it was just the beginning of the show. So, your books and talks on civilization have been very well received. And you have presented a point of view from the Sanatan Dharma point of view. And in fact, the Sanatan Dharma, or colloquially which is called Hinduism or Hindutva, whatever you may choose to call it, has been the most oppressed or most attacked of all the cultures of the planet. Is it the weakness of Sanatan Dharma, or is it the strength of Sanatan Dharma that it is able to withstand these attacks and still survive while others have failed? So I would like to start out.
That is such a deep question, Aditya ji, with this. So I think one has to go back into history and into prehistory itself and into proto-history to see how human thought has evolved over times leading into the many dichotomies that we have today in Dharmic thought and Abrahamic thought and these kinds of things. I think if you go back sufficiently, there was a time when there was no Abrahamic thought. And there was a time when dharma prevailed, the natural order prevailed, and people understood, our rishis understood the dharma, understood the natural, the rhythm of the universe, and tried to make sense of it all and tried to expound on these things to others. So when we see the history of dharma, we see there's been an expression of ideas from the rishis into society at large, living in conformance with the world. We also see in the history of the world that wars and religious wars, especially, started with the dawn of Abrahamism. Abrahamism, starting with a covenant that the Jewish people had with their God, created the us and the them. Until then, I don't think there was a theory that we are us and they are them. It is we are all in this together. That was the kind of thinking. We are all one with the cosmos, one with nature, one with cosmology. After that, the us and them thinking led to a lot of differences. And I think the Dharmic people did not have to encounter that much in India. However, the Dharmic people who are there in places like Armenia, in places like the Mitanni lands, they were subjected to a lot of the wars. I'm now talking about 1800 BCE, 1700, 1500 BCE, then going on to time frames like Gregory's time frame in Armenia, 300 current era, 200 current era. These are the time frames we're talking about. So these people meaning the Dharmic people living in these areas, experienced religious violence because of ideas, us and them kind of ideas. And we all know that led on to Islam that was born in Arabia, and that led to its own iconoclastic ideas and the theologically bent mind where they had to go at war with the Hindu people, the Dharmic people. We know the history of that. And we know when colonialists came and they encountered the Indian civilization, their desire also to subvert all of these things. So to answer your question, I think Dharma has been such a powerful, overwhelming idea for rationality, for humanity, for solving so many of the problems of today, that when people who were theologically loaded and invested with an idea of maintaining a doctrinal worldview of their lives, you can say, when they encountered it, their only recourse was to say, you are the them, we are the us, you are the them, and you, according to our doctrine, need to be destroyed. So we have encountered this. So I think what we are seeing is a reflection of the doctrinal theologies present in Abrahamic religions that cannot coexist with dharmic ideas. They've digested what they can, and at this point, they cannot coexist. And because they cannot coexist, there are two ways. One is I ignore you. Other ways, I destroy you. I assimilate you. I destroy you, assimilate you. Destroy your identity by assimilating you. So the ignorable is the idea that we have, why don't you live and let live? But live and let live is not an idea that comes very easily to people who are theologically being told, go and do this, because they believe divinity has told them that they have to create everything into the us. Sorry, long-winded answer, but I hope that addresses what you asked.
No, I think you put it very wisely and you put it very correctly. And I would latch on to one sentence that you said, that they cannot coexist. And in fact, you are absolutely right, because around almost like 3,000 years ago, almost 3,000, because I don't believe in the BC and AD conundrum that they talk. So almost 3,500 years back or 3,000 years back, where Chanakya said the same thing. And Chanakya said that the homogeneity builds national character. Well, this is the essence of what he said. And that means at that time also there were these Yavana people attacking India. And at that time, the Janapad or the districts of India or the small independent city states, they were asked to unite. Now, building on that, uh, we have seen the South American history, North American history, how the Europeans brought disease as a tool of war and brought their sick people to settle here, and then engaged them to mingle with the Native Americans, which is called Columbian exchange. And it's a very euphemistic term, Columbian exchange. But if you go into it, it's like a barbarism right under the beautiful name. I usually call that they call the most horrific hurricane as Katrina. It's a beautiful name, but it's a horrible hurricane. And so the strategy of inculturation, or this is a Christian term, and the assimilation that you said, and peaceful coexistence not possible. Now, what are the points on which they disagree when we say peaceful integration not possible?
Yeah, so I think that one can look deeply into the theological differences, starting from their concept of cosmology itself, starting from the creation. What is the notion of creation? So Genesis says that the Abrahamic God, who is distinct from creation. So we have a creator in some strange place who's outside of the physical creation, and creation is what he has made. And we believe, they believe that he created the world in 6 days, rested on the seventh day. And this has been the doctrinal idea of Genesis that has seeded Judaism, Christianity, and Islam from there on. Whereas the Indian ideas and philosophy, there are several of them, but then I think the most dominant thinking has been that we are one with the cosmos. There is no difference between the creator and the created, that we are all an expression of the cosmos. Whichever philosophical system we take, this kind of a thinking comes out of it. There is no question of there is a creator who lives in a unseen and cannot be seen kind of place, and he interacts in chosen medium of prophets to come and tell us that how humanity should live. That kind of a thinking has never been there in the dharmic systems. So that is the first fundamental difference. So they believe that this is the creator and the creator is there. We should worship the creator and not the created. And that kind of dichotomy gave rise to iconoclastic ideas that thou shalt not worship graven images. So starting with the time of Moses, when Moses was leading the people, Judaic people out of Egypt, he found that his people started making an image of a calf and were worshipping the golden calf. And he was obviously very, very upset, because that is a Judaic doctrine, not to worship a created image. And the same kind of thinking is there in Islam. Islam also goes about doing a similar kind of destruction of temples and so on, because they cannot live with the idea that we could worship what they call an idol. However, in the Indian context, these ideas of Nirguna and Sadguna Brahman have been so deeply evolved that Indians who have understood the Vedantic ideas of oneness with cosmos have understood that we are all part of the cosmos. We are all part of the cosmos. If I were to take some clay and make it into an image and focus my energy and pray to that as a representation of the divinity, we understand that's what it is. That is what Sri Rama did. Once he had finished the war in Lanka with Ravana, he comes back to Rameshwaram, and first thing he does is, on the beach, he creates a clay of a Shivalinga and he prays, because what he had killed a Brahmin. So this is what we are told. So it had not required us to build magnificent temples, magnificent murtis and vigraharas. These things were never required in the Indian context. Divinity was there everywhere. Whether it was under a tree was divine, a river was divine, or an earthen image you make is divine. Anything is divine, because it is part of the expression of who we are, that we seek divinity everywhere, seek cosmos, seek to live in equilibrium with nature. So we express the ideas in terms of dharma, karma, and reincarnation. The fact that our karma is going to follow us whichever lifetime we are going into, and we are enjoined upon to be aware of our karmic footprint and live life. The dichotomy with them is, no, you have one life to live. God has put you on earth and has put you in charge of all the living creatures on earth are under your stewardship. You can do what you like, and unlimited rape of the earth and anything can happen, because God has put you in charge and you can do whatever you like. So I think these are some of the very fundamental differences. If you look at Abrahamic traditions, not go into Christianity, Islam, or Judaism, but at the Abrahamic doctrinal level, and compare them with Dharmic ideas, these are the very fundamental ideas which we cannot coexist with each other. Right here. Interestingly, before I end that, Aditya ji, I had a talk with a missionary once in New Delhi airport. When I was waiting for my connecting flight, there was an American missionary who had come to India, and he made the mistake of talking to me. So, so I
Okay.
started talking to him. And eventually, it led to a point where when I talked to him about these things, he listened. He was very upset about the whole thing. Then he said, "Look, can we instead say God put us as stewards of earth rather than in charge of everything to rape at will? Can we place it as He put us as stewards of earth? It's our responsibility to steer the earth correctly." I congratulated him on his idea and said that yes, it's okay. You come closer to that idea, coming closer to the dharmic idea of having respect for nature, having respect for creation, everything. I'll end over there.
So coming back to Moses, this is one debate I had with many scholars of Judaism, and it looks like an idea because there is no historical verification of this character called Moses. And another one is Noah's Ark. There is no historical justification other than Purana when they were called Mean Avatar.
Right.
So we have no justification of any of these characters, and also the people you know very well that Quran is a carbon copy of Old Testament. It's
Mm-hmm.
people have not just replaced some names here and there, but 95% is the same. And but New Testament has a lot of Buddhist teachings in it,
Mm-hmm.
and which shows that because it was written 600 years or 700 years after Jesus was not there. So when you compare that with the history of the Vedic culture 5,000 years ago, well documented, mathematically well documented through astrological science, and also geographically well documented, where the earth patterns have not changed.
Mm-hmm.
The mountains which were there 5,000 years ago, still there. The lakes which were there 5,000 years ago, still there.
Mm-hmm.
So there is an ample archaeological, geographical, astrological proof of Vedic events. And I always say that the onus of proof is on the others, not on me. Because I believe what Vyas says, I believe what Valmiki says. I
Right.
may not, so I'm saying that that is an axiomatic truth. If you disprove it, give me enough proofs.
True.
But if you prove it, then I stand validated again.
True.
So, so now, but with the point of view of Moses and any of the figures that they talk about, there is no geographical scrutiny, there is no archaeological scrutiny, and certainly there is not astrological scrutiny because they did not know the mathematical science. They started knowing about numbers after Aryabhat, and after that there's one more gentleman, Brahmadatta or somebody, who invented Brahmagupta, who invented the number zero. So how can they be so sure of the faith which is not backed by facts?
Yes. So excellent question. So these historical evidences or lack thereof and facts fascinate me on the history of religion. So I do quite a bit of reading on this. And if you look at the history of the Jews or the Hebrew people or the Semitic people, it turns out that the earliest archaeological evidence is in a stele that was found in Egypt, dating back to 1200 BCE or so, that refers to something who could be referred to as the Habiru people and so on. That is the earliest evidence. As far as biblical historians try to say, Abraham probably lived in Canaan or in Ur around 1500 BCE, and this is the kind of time frame they place for him. And like you say correctly, there is no evidence that a character called Abraham lived. There's no evidence that a character called Noah lived, and so on. If you look at the historians, for example, like the names elude me, some of the Roman historians, I think it was Strabo and others, They say the Jewish people are the Kalami tribe of Brahmins from India.
Mm.
So they seem to think they're the Kalami tribe of Brahmins from India. So if we look, I strongly recommend a book by um, Higgins. I think the name is Higgins, and the name of the book is Anacalypsis. Anacalypsis. Anacalypsis by Higgins. And he has written extensively on the idea of the history of the Jews and how they seem to be very closely related to Hindu ideas. So if we take a different view of the Genesis story, if we take a different view of the Genesis story, we are told about Adam and Eve. We are told about Genesis. We are told that God created Adam. He saw that Adam was lonely. Out of his ribs, he made Eve. And he told them that this whole Eden is yours, except don't eat of the fruit of that tree. Snake comes and tempts Eve. It says that if you eat from the tree, you will realize that you are as powerful as God. That is the tree of wisdom. You'll get wisdom, you'll realize you're as powerful as God. So Eve goes and eats that, and she tempts Adam also to eat that, and God finds out curse, and so on. I try to recast the story in terms of the turning away of some Jews from the Vedantic ideas. The Vedantic ideas said you are born divine. You are born divine. It is basically your attachment to the world of objects, emotions, and thoughts, and ego, and other things that make us think that we are distinct and away from the cosmos. So, our goal in life is to embark on a journey of Vidya and trying to get the knowledge of my true nature. Who am I? That is our goal in nature. So, if we come back to the story, it says that since we are born divine, Abrahamic people wanted to remove away from that idea. So, they went and said that having that tree of knowledge is forbidden because God has said, don't eat that. You're distinct from God. You're not as clever as God. You cannot be elevated like God. So that was the idea, the turning away from Vedanta. Second Judaic story that supports this. There's a story about Abraham's childhood. In his childhood, he was called Brahm, not Abram, but Brahm. And the Old Testament says he lived on the other side of the river. It does not specify which river. It says on the other side of the river. It says his father was a murti maker. Murtis and vigrahas used to make that. That was his living, a sculptor. So one day his father leaves Brahm in charge, and he goes off. And when he comes back, he finds the workshop is all broken down and so on. And Abraham has actually gone at night and destroyed all the vigrahas and put the hammer in the hands of the biggest vigraha, which he does not destroy. So father asks, who did this? And he says, it must be the biggest vigraha, that he must have destroyed everything. And the father says, don't be silly. We know that won't happen. Then Brahma is supposed to have said, then why do you worship them? Then why do you worship them? So it appears that it is encoding of the turning away from the Saguna Brahman worship, where you worship in the form of an image, in the form of a deity, and so on. He turned away from that and he was excommunicated. So if the Bible story says God took him from this side of the river and put him to that side and made his name Abram. Abram is always used in the context of opposites in Sanskrit. So Abraham, somebody who's not wise, became Abraham. So Abraham is supposed to have started his theology there. And that ties in neatly with the Roman historians who say that the Jews are the Kalami tribe of Brahmins from India who probably were excommunicated. And they probably lived in this Iraq, in this Babylon, in this Israel, Canaan area, these kind of areas. So the actual history, Aditya says that these people were in exile and were enslaved by the Egyptians, enslaved by the Babylonians. Their first temple, second temple of Jerusalem, their entire history can be talked about in terms of these two things. So, like you correctly said, there is no historical evidence for either Abraham or Moses. In fact, what appears to be is that there's a lot of ideas from Vedanta that have been taken until such time they cannot take it anymore because it goes against their theology. There the message is perverted. We see evidence of that. And I recommend this book, Anacalypsis by Higgins, for this.
So the only books that I ever read, and I usually read only, is Mahabharata, Ramayana, and Bhagavad Gita.
Mm-hmm.
Now you bring me to the same point. is Vyasadeva says in the beginning of Mahabharata that if there is any history which doesn't trace its origin in Mahabharata, that is fake. So it's not
Mhm.
Donald Trump saying it. It's a 5,000 years back when Mahabharata was written, Vyasadeva declared it. Now you bring me back my faith strong, you make my faith stronger by pointing out these things which I did not know. That their history also has connections with the ancient Mahabharata of India, and down the line, not at the same time. And somehow they have lost connection with Hinduism or Sanatan Dharma. But the basic principles still of spirituality still remain the same across all the faiths. The focus on solitude, which is all recommended in all the faiths, that
Mhm.
a wise man should stay alone,
Mhm.
and the concept of deity worship, archa vigraha puja, doesn't go away. Whether
Mhm.
you cry in front of a wall, or you circulate a stone,
Mhm.
or you do, so those things never go away. So humans cannot have anything, so they have to put faith in something which they can see, feel, and touch,
Mhm.
and even emotionally attached to it or physically touching it. It's not possible to maintain faith. So the
Mhm.
basic, they may hate what Sanatana Dharma stands for. They may hate idolaters, but actually there can be no human being without idolatry also. Whether if the fact that you go to a church means you're an idolater because it's a building made by man. The fact you go to a mosque, that means you're an idolater because you go to a mosque. So I think this broad rational thought, which
Mhm.
has been neglected by
Mhm.
so-called religious people, is astounding to my mind, that how can they be so ignorant. Now I need to hear your comments because you have done a lot of research. I can make it out now with all these different authors. What is the common thing that they're rebelling against? We don't understand what is one thing they're rebelling against.
I find it difficult to say that one thing. So let me please give me the freedom to have a bigger answer. I'll try to come to the one thing. So I think if you pose the question of what is the goal of life, what is the goal of life for a dharmic person? What is the goal of life for a Judaic person, Jew? What is the goal of life for a Christian or for a Muslim? Some of these theological differences will become apparent, and it will start showing us some strange, startling things. In my talks, I say that the Shad Darshanas that have been evolved in our part of the world, the darshanas allowed us to see what were permissible, not permissible, but what were the logical means to grow our body of knowledge, which we call pramana. It tried to see whether direct experience, perception, inference, negative logic, shabda pramana, many kinds of pramanas where we could admit knowledge and grow knowledge. For the Hindu, I believe the goal of life has been to dispel the avidya about our true existence. It has been to dispel the avidya. Who am I? Am I this body? Am I this mind? Or am I something more than this body and this brain, mind, and all these kind of things? Who am I and what am I? Such a quest has been recommended by every one of our rishis going back to the ancient past. Every one of them, the Upanishads and the Brahmanas and the Samhitas, Aranyakas, everybody everywhere is saying, go on a quest and understand who you are. And that you is basically a capital U. It is not just this body, flesh, or me, who I am. So we are told that you have an existence that is beyond this body. This existence is part of the Brahman. The Atman that we have is part of the Brahman, and that is your true nature. Understand your true nature. Understand, and the process of understanding is this inward journey that we go, admitting knowledge sources, various pramanas, knowledge sources of various sampradayas, and try to evolve spiritually into who we are. So the goal in life, Hindu, is dispel avidya. What kind of avidya? Doesn't matter. Any Any stream of education or knowledge you take in today's world, eventually, if you go high enough, it'll make you into a spiritual person. Any knowledge, whether it's engineering, medicine, or music, or arts, whatever you take, eventually, if you go high enough, it'll become a spiritual goal. And that spirituality will lead you to dispel notions of avidya, vidya, and these kind of things. This is my best understanding of Hinduism. If you ask, if you see what the Christian goal is, the Christian goal is to believe that the four Gospels were written by people, either eyewitness or heard or whatever, of what Jesus is and what he said and his parables and these kind of things. So the only way to the Father is through the Son. When such a statement is made, they believe that that is the goal in life, that they have to believe in certain axioms of Christianity, that a sinless person was born to a virgin, and the sinless person was crucified, and the sinless person resurrected, and belief in him and his sacrifice saves you from what? From eternal damnation. So your goal in life is to follow a divine dictated law. If you follow the divine dictated law, you would be admitted into either the Christian heaven or the Islamic heaven, which is Jannat, or into the Judaic concept of heaven, and so on. If you did not follow the divine dictated law, you would be eternally in purgatory. You means, I don't know whether they mean the body or the spirit or the mind, whatever concept they have, it'll eternally be tortured purgatory for eternity. That's such a horrific thing to think about. So you ask me the one line answer for that: goal of life. What is the goal of life? If you investigate this, and you'll find that there's a world of difference. A dharmic person is a scientist. You have to go. You have to understand nature. You have to go on a journey, understand nature, understand sources of knowledge, question everything. Eventually, you come to an understanding. Our rishis have promised us you'll have an understanding of Brahman. You go to the state of Satchitananda. This is what our rishis have promised us. In the Abrahamic constructs, your goal in life is to follow a divine dictated law. Don't worry about knowledge. Don't worry about anything else. Nothing matters. Nothing matters. You only follow the divine dictated law and you'll be admitted to heaven. So that morality, everything springs from this: follow the divine dictated law. Morality is there. Everything is there for them. If you follow that, the formula has been followed. You will go to heaven or eternal purgatory. That is my best understanding of the differences between Dharmic people and Abrahamic people.
That was summarized in one line, very big saint in North America. He said, their book tells us what to do. Our book lets you decide for yourself.
Yes.
I think that's where we end this discussion. But Raj Vedamji, it's a pleasure to talk with you. We'll continue this session, and I'm sure people will love it. This session of ours. In few minutes, we have covered the deep essence of the main differences, and also we also going to continue a little bit deep dive into specific areas where we can prove historically or take out the historical records that we can discuss on this show. Thank you, Raj Vedamji, for your valuable time. I know you have a very busy day.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It's been my pleasure to talk with you, Aditya ji, and my pranams, and thank you to all the listeners too.
Yeah, and thank you so much. Namaskar. And keep listening to us, keep subscribing, and follow Raj Vedam on his Twitter handle and also on his Facebook. And I'll also send you the book links that he has written. And do join Sattology session tomorrow. Thank you.
Thank you.